G'day, welcome to Scrounger's Workshop. First of all, I'm sorry I haven't posted anything in a while. I've been busy rearranging my workshop, and for somewhat of a hoarder, that can be a big job. I used to have shelves all along here behind me. They've all gone, so I had to go somewhere. And the fruits of my labour are what is behind me, not so much the clamps. For those that aren't aware, I collect Australian-made G-clamps. Don't ask me why, long story for another video. But we're losing our manufacturing history. Every Western country is. And I don't know of anyone else that collects the G-clamps. We all use them, can't live without them. But no one I know collects them. And these are all Australian-made and manufactured. It's behind that. It's the important bit. My workshop is a great big tin shed, and I live in Australia. So it gets hot. And for 30 years I've put up with the heat. Drives me out of here by about 11 o'clock in the morning in summer. So I have insulated all the walls and all the roof of my workshop. I've redone all the lighting, and I've installed reverse cycle air conditioning. So in here, it's awesome. I'll give you a quick look at what I've been doing, and I'll show you a couple of tools I've picked up. And there's another chapter in the ongoing saga of getting the chuck off the vise, of getting the chuck off my lathe. My son is a flooring warehouse manager, and all this plywood is cover sheets that come in the hard flooring. Normally gets thrown in the bins. He just saved those for me. And the insulation is between that plywood and the tin roof. There's about a 60mm gap, so it all fitted very well. The air conditioner is a reverse cycle heat pump, so it will heat in the winter and cool in the summer, and it's right in front of my workbench. I'm one of those people that likes to have the air blown directly on me. First new acquisition was I picked this up a couple of months ago. This is a tapping drill, designed for tapping threads into steel. So let's get it up on the bench, take a closer look, and see how it all works. It's quite interesting. And the first thing that struck me as interesting is that cover with the plaque on it is all cast aluminium. Now with the cover removed, you can see how different this is to a normal drill press. The bottom pulley goes to the top pulley, and that's a single belt, goes around and back and just keeps going around and around. There's a clutch one at the top that spins counterclockwise, and one at the bottom spins clockwise. So with some masking tape on the chuck, it becomes much easier to see. You can see it here actually turning counterclockwise. So now as I bring the chuck down, it'll stop running in reverse. The bottom clutch will take over, and the chuck will now spin in the correct direction to tap your thread. Now if you feel the tap starting to bind, it's simply a matter of backing off either to neutral or let it go all together, and the whole thing will back right out of the hole. Clever. These drill presses are still available new, but as you can see, they're not cheap, and you're going to need to add freight to that price. I went to pick up the tapping drill. The same seller had this John Hine fly press for sale. He only wanted $200 for it. You guys that collect these things will be spitting at that price. They're normally at least 5 times that. So I certainly grabbed that, and I put my forklift trolley to good use here to get it up on the bench because it's heavy. Now I actually had to bullshit to my wife a little bit with this one. I told her I could probably flip it for a good profit. I actually have no intention of flipping it. I want to restore it and leave it right here next to my Atlas Arbor press. They make a good pair. Here's one I found at a local auction, and you'll notice it's missing the big bore weight on the end. And here's another one I saw on eBay, $1,700, very similar to mine. One thing I noticed was the crackling in the paint you can see there, and I thought it was just age. But looking up in an old catalogue, that crackling was actually from the factory. I have no idea how I'm going to reproduce that, so I think I'm just going to do it in machinery grey, the same as the Atlas Arbor press. Next person that owns it can always change it. A few weeks later, the same seller had this tapping chuck up for sale for a mere $50. It was pretty dirty, but I don't think it's done a lot of work because it cleaned up really well. These are between $500 and $600 used to buy on the second-hand market. So I was very pleased to get it. And it essentially does the same job as that whole drill press. Only with this, only the Morse taper goes into the drill press. So it makes it a little bit more convenient for me. I don't need to have the whole drill press now. And for me, as a collector of Australian made tools, I get a double bonus. This is made by Richard Piper in Sydney, Australia. A couple I found on Marketplace recently. That one's $500 and this one was $600. So I think I got a pretty good bargain. You can see here one of the really good features of these tapping heads is that when they're tapping forwards, they go at one speed, and then they actually go at twice the speed when you back out of the hole, which is a really handy feature for speeding up your work. Most of these type of tapping heads are the same, and I just really like it. I think it's brilliant. So let's have a test drive. It makes easy work of that, so let's try it on something just a little bit thicker. What I've also done here is just tighten up one side of that chuck and not both, just to see how it goes at self-centering. It doesn't seem to have any trouble at all. So this is definitely one of those tools I'll be keeping forever and put into good use. I'm so glad I've got it. How's this for one of those it was meant to be situations? I was just getting ready to upload this to my YouTube channel and I turned on Marketplace and it had just landed. Number 2's big brother, number 3. And at just $100, I was on it like a fat kid on a hot dog. The main difference between the two is number 2 has a number 2 Morse taper and goes from 0 to 1/2 inch, and the number 3 runs a number 3 Morse taper and goes from 3/8 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch. So that range will cover just about anything any hole I want to tap in the future. So I've made the decision that to offset the cost of these, I'm going to sell the tapping drill press that I picked up. I think I'll also make a nice box to keep these in. Now back to getting the chuck off my lathe. Here's a recap from one of my previous videos of what happened last time I tried to get it off. I've just taken this video after I got the chuck loose, just to give you an idea of how much leverage I needed on the Stilsons. That pipe is 1 metre long and I was holding it on the end and I was still giving it plenty of heave to get that chuck to break loose. Incredibly tight. So the problem turned out to be these two faces here would mesh together so hard that I had to go through just as much hassle again to undo the chuck. Now a couple of people made suggestions that I make a gasket for in here, and I appreciate those. What I've ended up doing is making a plastic one out of an ice cream container lid of some sort. The first time I spun this up with this in place, it worked really, really well. The chuck spun off, came straight at me, hit me in the stomach, and then aimed at my feet. And luckily I jumped quickly enough and it missed my feet and hit the rubber mat I stand on. So lesson learned there. So what I did, I fitted this 4mm grub screw. So now when I want to change the chuck, I simply back that off. I'll take it right out for now. Get thus big and dead blow hammer and give it a whack. But pretty easy to get off. And as you can see, what I've done is just where that grub screw comes up, I've just drilled that out a little bit just to lock it in place. So now when I screw the 4-jaw on, lock the back. That hole for the grub screw lines up really nicely. So that just needs a tad more tightening. Get a bit of help on there. Lines up nice and tight. Then I can put my grub screw in, snug that down, which also helps center it. That's it. It will not come off now. And a big shout out to Scout Crafter. He put me onto these Bondus Allen keys and they're fantastic. So thank you, Scout. just to show I'm not even scared. Perfect. So that's solved. So if you've got a with a screw-on chuck, that's the repair I've used, and I found it very, very successful. Just before I go, I sold the tapping press for a good price. That covered the cost of the 2 tapping heads. And I found this old side table on the side of the road one day and thought, that's nice wood, I might be able to use some of that one day. Typical hoarder attitude. However, this time it did pay off, because I started putting together this box. It's not finished yet. Doesn't need to be perfect, but I think it's pretty good just to store these chucks in. Cheers.